Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach David Bartke here. It's Thursday, August 17th, 2017. And we're embarking on a new adventure this week, David. We're picking up a new book, actually an old book, but new for what we've been doing.
Yay, that's exciting. I can't wait because I love this book.
It's one of those formative books that you find out about after you hear about or read or watch the movie of The Secret.
Yes. Yeah, somewhere along the line, everybody who's into law of attraction definitely hears about who wrote this book.
That's right. Abraham, the woman who talks to spirits on the other side, the crazy one.
Also known as Esther Hicks.
Esther Hicks, of Esther and Jerry Hicks fame, yes. So before we get into that, you had something you were going to surprise me with, and I just can't wait to find out what it is. So what is this thing you've been holding on here?
Well, I just wanted to get your opinion about, because, we talk about vibration and high vibrations, low vibrations. So the other night, I saw a Broadway show. It's Hello, Dolly with Bette Midler.
How fun.
And, obviously everybody knows who she is all over the world.
Yep.
And the minute she came out on stage, the whole theater roared with applause and yays and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I just wondered, wow, what does that do to somebody's vibration?
Oh,
to get
can you
that
imagine?
Kind of, whether it's her or whoever, and they, wherever they go, there's, people applauding and fawning all over you and cheering for you.
Well, you know what they say, the hardest part is that you don't want it to go to your head, because when it goes to your head, then all of a sudden you start expecting that you're, the next coming, the second coming or whatever,
Well, yes, that's a whole other thing, which hopefully we hope that people don't have.
Absolutely,
that,
yeah.
But I'm just wondering if that helps, let's just use her, for example. Does that help keep her at a raised vibration just during the show or in general? It's kind of interesting to think about.
Oh, I would think that it keeps her going all day and all night. I mean, when you get
think?
that degree of adulation and attention, I mean, I remember seeing a TV interview one time in which Sir Laurence Olivier was asked by the interviewer why he does this, why he does acting. And his answer was to lean over to the interviewer, look close into his eyes and say, "Look at me, look 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 at me." They love being watched. That's why they become actors. So to get that level of attention and adulation is that they're just eating that up. Because that's why they do it. They love that attention.
But, so you do the show, and then I wonder what happens to someone when the show's over, the run, it has its run, and then you're not getting that every day. Do you still have it because you experienced it, or does it die because you're not getting that kind of charge every day from an audience? Or
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think it varies from one person to the other. It's yes because both are true. It's also that everybody reacts differently. For instance, Robin Williams was notorious for his ability to just be on whenever he was in front of an audience. When he was doing movies and so forth, and he would be on with the crew, he'd be on with the cast, he'd be on all the time, and then he'd have his downtime. And in his downtime, he'd go sit with his wife, and they would just hold hands. He needed the de-stimulation. He needed to escape it because it became so overwhelming. So I think there's one example of how it affects people. I have also seen interviews from some famous people who talk about, Oprah Winfrey being one of them, who talk about how it is something that just carries on and on and on. It's just throughout their lives. Every single breath they take, they're just inundated with it. And Oprah, I believe, talked quite a bit about kind of that dark side that we referred to earlier, that you don't want to get caught up in the second coming, concept that gets you all messed up. And you can easily do that. I mean, there's a lot of stories about famous personalities who got into drug culture and so forth just because it was so much to handle. And you have these huge highs and huge lows. I mean, bipolarism is a major problem among entertainers. And bipolarism is what they used to call manic depression. It's super high and then super low.
Yeah.
So I think it can work either way. It depends on the personality, and it depends how well you're able to kind of integrate it into your life.
Right. And then the next question I always think about. Well, it looks a certain way from the outside, but I wonder when you're that person.
Yeah, I've wondered that too.
Is it? Are you feeling that? Like, that would be so interesting to know. I think what we have to do is get Bette Midler on the next show we do.
Yeah, that would be good. I'd like that, yeah.
And just find out, like, in normal times.
Right.
Because we're all responsible for our vibrations, so obviously we can't count on whether it's, a roar of applause from an audience or when you finally get your dream car. Like, we can't rely on that to keep us at a high vibration. We have to do the inner work.
Right.
So I always wonder, I wonder if they're experiencing it the way it looks like they are.
My wife and I actually had a similar conversation to this. We weren't actually talking about this, but I'm realizing now the parallels were pretty dramatic. She was bringing up the fact that I think I mentioned before she has a gardening service business, and it's doing very well this year. In the last couple, 3 years, we've had some good growth. It actually grew to the point where it was becoming too much to manage, and her stress levels were going through the roof. So I've jumped in, and I've been doing things to really streamline things and just make everything work better. And we've made some good progress. We've got to the point now where instead of being ready to kill her, the stress is just high. But the goal is to bring the stress way, way down, and it's going to take some time to do that. But we've made the progress, and that's good. Put it this way. She used to work till like 9 or 10 at night. Now she stops the day at 5 or 6. So that's a big improvement.
Much better.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah.
So there has been tremendous improvement there. And one of the things that we talked about was she had a meeting with her staff before she started working on a particular project today. They had this really, really big project, actually the biggest project that we've ever gotten. And all the team was there. And the team now is about 10 people, something like that. They were all there, and she's looking around at her team. She's saying, wow, these people all work for me.
Yeah.
She had one of those moments. And in that moment, I asked her, so how did that feel? And she said, I don't know. It was such a new feeling, I think, that she hasn't really had a chance to integrate it into her life process, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think what happens, at least on a smaller scale like this one, is it takes some time just to get used to it. To get used to that energy that's flowing there. As she gets more and more used to it, as she becomes more accustomed to it, I think a big thing that happens is her confidence level increases.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know? So, speaking more generally, if we are people who are experiencing a surge like the one she's experiencing, where all of a sudden we have more employees on board and she's realizing, wow, I have this big team working for me now. I've never had that before. I think what it actually does is feed your self-confidence. And that's really critical, as you know, to being able to apply the law of attraction. Because until you can feel confident that what you are focusing on is actually going to come true, it's hard to continue to believe like you need to that it will come true.
Yeah, you have to have that certainty. Yeah.
So it reinforces itself in that way. I'll be interested to kind of entertain this question regarding my wife a year from now to see where her self-confidence level is. I suspect it's going to be pretty good, and I suspect that what we're attracting into our lives is going to be that much better as a result.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting.
But what do you think? I mean, there's my take on it. What's your take?
Well, I just think it's a personal thing, too. Obviously, in that moment, like getting back to like a performer, I guess, that you're feeling this amazing high vibration because there's a room full of hundreds of people cheering for you. Yes. But then when you get home, there's not a room full of people. So, I think it's important.
I would suspect that somebody who is experiencing that kind of high-low thing, the smart one, let's put it that way, the one who's kind of in tune with how they need to use it, is going to use the downtime away from the stage to just visualize and remember what it's like to be on the stage. Because when you're doing that, you're reliving it. You're re-experiencing that energy level again.
Well, it would be wonderful if all the performers knew about the law of attraction.
Well, it would be also wonderful if they knew about it and they applied it. Yeah, it's not enough to know it; you have to apply it.
Yeah, but those who don't know that. So maybe, because sometimes I wonder too, like, why do some performers keep going? They just work constantly, relentlessly, and I always think, well, maybe that's what they're thriving on, that vibration boost every time they get applause or fawning over or a new movie out. Like that's how they get their vibrational boost.
Oh yeah, I think of somebody like a Meryl Streep, or one of the really top actors, the ones who just blow us away with their performances. They are true craft practicers. Because they just love the practicing of the craft. That's actually more important to them than the adulation. And that kind of person, I think, is more along the line of what you're talking about. That's the person who's going to just continually get jazzed by the fact that they get to do this. They get to play these games every single day and take on new characters and take on behaviors that society normally wouldn't let them carry on. But because this is a show, they can be Mr. Nasty Person. That kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. No, but you're right. Someone who would know about law of attraction and how to apply it, who was a performer, they could totally use those moments of high applause to totally raise their vibration.
Well, plus method acting. I mean, method acting. Now, I'm not an actor, so I just based on what I've heard from interviews and inside the actor's studio and that kind of thing. Method acting is basically where the actor takes on the personality. You become that person in a sense. And you start thinking like that person and acting like that person and feeling like that person. You dress like that person. When method actors very often, when they're doing a movie, in between takes, they're still staying in character off camera. Because it's so much easier when you just stay in character throughout the entire day. And then they take the character off at the end of the day. Well, that kind of person who's so heavily immersed in it, that's actually a two-edged sword. I mean, Louise and I have talked about this a lot. Look at all of the rather famous actors who played bad characters who died early.
Wow. I never thought of that, my goodness.
Or actually, there's a really classic example. I don't know if you ever saw the television series The West Wing, which told a story about...
I know of it. I didn't watch it.
Okay. Well, it tells the story of a fictional White House. And the guy who was the chief of staff, Leo, had a history of drinking and alcohol abuse and so forth. And in the story, he had previously had a heart attack a number of years ago. And toward the end of the series, he has another heart attack and almost dies. Within, I think they were like a year and a half away from ending the series. Within a year of that, the actor himself died of a heart attack.
Oh, my God.
Now, you can't convince me that there's not a connection there. Because he's living a character who is prone to heart attacks. He lives and acts out having a heart attack, and then he has a heart attack.
Wow.
That's not coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your advice to actors is to not take roles involving dying.
Well, that's one way to do it. The thing that I've noticed about the really top actors, the ones who get lots of interviews and so forth, they all tell the same story. That after a take is done, they're laughing, they're joking, they're kidding each other, they're having a great time. And I think they do that in order to offset the negative roles of the characters that they're playing while they're on camera.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Because you got to contradict it in order to stop that negative flow from happening.
Yeah.
In fact, how many times have we heard interviews from people who did a famous movie or famous TV series or whatever, where the actors talked about how wonderful it was to work with the crew?
All the time, yes.
Do we ever hear a story where the film or the TV series or whatever was successful where they didn't get along?
No, you always hear like, "Oh, I couldn't have done this without such a wonderful crew."
Exactly. Now, part of that is learning how to do interviews. You want to present yourself well, but a large portion of that is it's really true, and it has to be if you think about it. From a law of attraction perspective, they have to because they're doing drama for most of the time, and even the comedy that they're doing is usually comedy where someone's getting hurt. So you have to have a way to counteract that. And that's why I think those films succeed. The films succeed because the actors can successfully separate the characters they're playing from their own need to feel good.
Yeah. There was another actor too. This reminds me of when you were saying that you think there's a correlation between sometimes what role they play and then that manifests in real life. Was it Heath Ledger? Who?
Yeah.
Remember he played the Joker in Batman.
Right.
And that was a really psychologically taxing role to play.
Oh yeah.
And then unfortunately, not too long after that, he OD'd. So.
Well, going back about 60 years, James Dean.
Yes.
James Dean was an up-and-coming actor. Everybody agreed he had a major career ahead of him.
Yes.
But he was a very unhappy person, very angry. And what did he end up doing? He ended up crashing his sports car, killing himself. So there's an example of an actor who didn't learn how to separate them and didn't learn how to feed his need for positive stuff.
So what you're suggesting is if an actor holds himself in a low vibration for long enough based on what role they're playing, then that could attract something in their real life.
You have to contradict it. You have to literally contradict it. What is it we talk about in trying to apply the law of attraction? We talk about being consistent in what we're focusing on. So, for instance, we talked a week or two ago about how all prayers get answered yes. Maybe it was last week, I think we actually said that. All prayers, the answers are yes. And it's true. It's not just prayers. Every thought that we put out there, the universe answers back yes. The bad part, the reason that people don't get what they're thinking about is they contradict it. First they say, I just had a conversation with a guy just before we did the show that illustrates it beautifully. This is a guy who's had all kinds of terrible things happen recently. He got evicted, his dog is sick, his mom is near death. I mean, just all these horrible things are happening to him. And all he can talk about is all the horrible things that are happening to him. Well, guess what? Of course, bad things are going to happen. So he actually won't try to focus on positivity very much. Most of the time he evades the whole subject. But on those very few occasions where he does focus on it, he doesn't get a quick result. And so he says, well, it doesn't really work. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you spent 5 seconds focusing on what you wanted, and then you spent the next 24 hours focusing on why it wasn't going to happen. Well, the same thing's got to apply in the acting world. If you're focusing on doing a role that's very dramatic and it's got all this negativity going on, if you aren't countering that with positivity, you aren't contradicting it. So you're encouraging it to come true in your life. You have to contradict it in order to stop it.
Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to go give a lecture at all the drama schools in New York and California, so all the actors protect themselves.
So, David, I guess we'll be seeing you next week on Inside the Actors Studio.
Goodness. But yeah, it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, it is. And it's instructive, too, because we aren't actors. We aren't dealing with, the adulation of millions and so forth, but we all have our own ups and downs every day. And we are living on small scale what these people live on a large scale. It's really no different. The only thing that's different is the scale. So it's worth keeping in mind. Yeah,
and then I have a fun, manifestation story from a client.
Oh, okay.
And, sometimes it's good to tell the fun ones, too.
Absolutely.
Because in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's a small thing that was manifested or a big, your dream house or a dream car. It's the same idea.
Oh, positive is positive, no matter how you slice it.
Right, so a client wanted to attract a particular type of backpack made by Chanel, Chanel, the fancy Chanel
perfumes and so forth.
Designer, okay?
Right.
So she wanted a particular one, and it turned out that they were sold out. She was told, they don't make that many of those, and it's sold out. So she just told the person at the store, well, if you ever are able to get one, however, here's my number, just let me know. And she kept looking at it and thinking, oh, it'd be so nice to have this backpack. And lo and behold, I think she said it was not even 2 weeks later, she gets a call from Chanel saying, we located the backpack. We just got one in We don't know why they got it in, but we did. And they texted her a picture, was the exact one she wanted, and she was like, "Oh my God, yes, I want this backpack." And then to make it even better, they're pricey. Like anything Chanel apparently is very pricey.
Oh yeah.
I think she said it was like $2,600 or something like that for a backpack. So she was telling her mother about it, and then her mother said, "Oh my goodness, I just got a rewards card for $2,000 from Bloomingdale's. You can have it." And it was it was just like, here she got what she was focusing on, which it wasn't supposed to be available, and not only that, she was gifted this card that basically paid for the whole thing.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's the kind of thing that just makes you feel good. You get goosebumps for that one. That's good.
Yeah. So no, was it like a dream house or dream car? No, but still, the idea is the same.
It doesn't even matter what the money amount is. What matters is that it happened.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That she still, even though it was supposed to be something that wasn't available anymore, she still focused on it. She still looked at the pictures every day and said, "Oh, how wonderful it would be to have this," and kept herself in that high vibration about it. Well, and not only did one manifest when it wasn't supposed to, then the whole thing practically got paid for.
It's interesting that you mentioned the word vibration, because that actually gives us a route back to talking about our original topic.
Good.
Because we're going to be talking about Ask and It Is Given. Ask and It Is Given by Abraham-Hicks. And Abraham-Hicks does need a little bit of explanation for people who have not heard of them before. It's actually one person voicing many voices.
Yeah.
And that sounds, to many people, particularly to devout Christians, like speaking in tongues and having the Antichrist coming through your mouth and things like that. But that's really not what the case is. This is actually, this is a bit controversial. I mean, you may not believe this, and if you don't believe it, it's okay, because as it turns out, what Esther Hicks, through Abraham Hicks, has to tell us is still really good, regardless of whether you believe where she's getting it from.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because, because she's saying that she gets blocks of information, and she can translate the information in her mind, and it's all amazing law of attraction information.
And this information, these blocks of information, she says, is coming from the other side, from the spirit side.
Yes, and apparently it's a group of, for lack of a better word, beings. And just to make it easier, she calls them Abraham.
Right.
That's kind of how she describes it.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, too, like you were saying, like, wherever it's coming from, it's really amazing information.
It is, yeah, because you listen to it for a while and you read it for a while. The hardest part is getting through the strange way that Abraham speaks through Esther Hicks. It's a very repetitive way of talking, and it's very noun-heavy, so it starts to get overwhelming in terms of its denseness and its heavy attitude and so forth. But once you get past that in your mind and just listen to what they're saying, wow, it really starts to ring true deep down in the depths of your being very quickly, I find.
Yes, what I love about the information, too, is when you first hear something, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, I kind of get it. And then you could hear that same thing a year later, and you just get it at a deeper level. Like you think you get it, and then you get it even at a deeper level. And then sometime later you'll get it at an even deeper level. It's just all very interesting.
It's also interesting to see what the critics have said about it. Like if you go to Amazon, you can see what people who gave it a 1-star or 2-star rating, what they had to say about this or some of the other stuff that Abraham Hicks puts out. Mm-hmm. And I remember one in particular, he complained that, the whole book is about this. What you think about is what you're going to get in your life. Now I just saved you from buying and reading the book. And he's right in a sense, because that message keeps coming through over and over and over. It's very repetitive in that sense. What makes the book worth reading and what's worth studying is if you study each individual instance where that concept is brought in, it's brought in slightly differently. It's giving you a different way, a different perspective of seeing that same thing, which is helpful because the initial concept itself is a tough concept. It's kind of counterintuitive to the way we're used to thinking in Western society. So it's important to be able to get to the meat of it and to find out why it is they keep talking about the same concept over and over again.
Yes, and also it's important to read it too because you're getting explanations of why.
Yes.
Like, it's not just what you think about you attract, but to me it's kind of like math. Like, when you learn math, if you don't get the very basic parts as it goes on, you won't understand any of it.
Yeah, that's true.
to me, when I think of the information from Abraham that Esther channels, you kind of have to understand all the basics to really get the more that you learn. If you don't get the basic foundation of it all, you won't get it as much.
So let's start off with the introduction to the book, which is called An Introduction to Abraham, and it's written by Esther Hicks, in which basically she tells the story of how she, in a sense, got to know Abraham. And we won't do the whole thing, but we'll start off with it because it's a good way to begin the conversation. So it starts off this way. Quote, "She speaks with spirits," our friend said. "She'll be here next week and you can make an appointment with her and ask her anything you like." That's about the last thing on this earth that I would ever want to do, I thought. But at the same time, I heard Jerry, my husband, saying, "We really would like to make an appointment. How do we go about doing that?" You can just imagine her reaction to this. Because what you find out as you read this is she was a devout Christian, and this was all very scary to her.
Yeah, she was not seeking any of this.
No, not at all. No. So we could just save you a large piece of this introduction just by telling you that. But continuing, it says, "That was 1984. And in the 4 years that we'd been married, we never had an argument or even exchanged cross words." Pretty good relationship. We were two joyous people living happily ever after with each other and compatible on nearly every subject that came up. The only discomfort that I ever felt was when Jerry would entertain friends with one of his stories from 20 years earlier relating his experiences with the Ouija board. If we were at a restaurant or some other public place, when I sensed one of those stories coming on, I would politely, or sometimes not so politely, excuse myself and retreat to the ladies' room, sit in the bar, or take a walk to the car until I believed that sufficient time had passed and the account would be over. Happily, Jerry eventually stopped telling those stories when I was around. Now, I wasn't what you'd call a religious girl, but I attended enough Sunday school classes to develop a very strong fear of evil and the devil. Thinking back, I'm not really sure if our Sunday school teachers had actually devoted a greater proportion of our classes to teaching us to fear the devil, or if that's simply what stood out in my mind. But that is, for the most part, what I remember from those years. So, as I've been taught, I carefully avoided anything that could possibly have any connection to the devil. One time, when I was a young woman, I was sitting in a drive-in theater and happened to look back out the back window of the car at the other movie screen and saw a horrible scene from The Exorcist, a movie I purposely avoided seeing. And what I saw, without hearing the sound, affected me so strongly I had nightmares for weeks. So that gives you a taste of what Esther was like. And it doesn't sound anything at all like someone who says, "Hey, I'm going to go around and I'm going to scam people by saying that I can listen to spirits from the other side."
Exactly.
It's like so far away from that. You say, okay, so they aren't con artists, so who are they? And we could go on and tell a lot of the story here, but if we read the whole thing, we'd probably be on for 2 or 3 hours. So let's try to avoid that.
Yeah.
To summarize, what happened was, at some point in time, very shortly after that part of the story she was just telling, they discovered another channeler. And that channeler, don't tell me I've forgotten the name already. Do you remember the name of it?
I remember the name of the channeler. No.
Oh, what was it? Beginning with an S. I can't think what it is. Well, I'll skim through the book as I'm reading here as I'm talking, and I'll see if I can spot it. But they'd heard about this one person who channeled, and Jerry wanted, of course, to go find out. And Esther was really reluctant. She didn't really want to go, but all right, she kind of got dragged into it. And they did this session with this channeler, and they got some interesting information out of it. Esther was a little bit skeptical. Jerry was buying into it and all that kind of thing. And in the course of this, they discovered another channeler, a local one, named Theo, who is not famous at all. Seth, that's who it is. Seth Speaks.
Oh,
that was
that's
the one.
right. Yes.
Seth was the one they heard about. Well, the woman who channeled Seth had since died at that point in time. So they couldn't actually do a session with her. That's why they went to this local person named Theo, who had his own or her own deal going on. And they did a couple sessions that way. The only thing that Esther really got out of it was a prediction, if you will, a hint that basically said that she was going to be a channeler, which kind of scared the daylights out of her. She really didn't want to be one.
Yeah, that was not even in her realm of awareness.
No, and it made her very
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable. But according to the message they got, she, as a human being, was very receptive to the kind of connection that would be needed in order to be able to transmit information that way. And all of a sudden, one day, a situation happened where she, and this was in session with this Theo person, where all of a sudden she just felt like something was coming through and she had to express it somehow. And at first she did it through like automatic handwriting, and what was coming to her she just would write down. And then she did it through typing. And at one point, she was actually typing with her nose because that was the only way she could make sense out of what was coming over, which is weird. That's just plain strange. It's just crazy. What she typed out the first time that she actually was able to get a full message out was, "I am Abraham. I am your spiritual guide."
Isn't that amazing, though?
Well, it's not only amazing, it's scary. Because think about who Esther was.
Lock the doors.
Yeah, this was really not terribly comfortable stuff.
Yeah.
But over time, she became intrigued by the experience because for her, of course, it's a very singular experience that the rest of us aren't having on a regular basis. Here she is directly experiencing that and trying, kind of like in a vague sense, like my wife who was getting used to the fact that she had 10 employees working for her. Well, this is the even bigger one. She's getting these messages and she doesn't know where they're coming from. And the messages are spelling out, "I am Abraham, I am your spirit guide." That's freaky. That just freaks you out. So it took her a lot of time to get used to it. Eventually, though, she started to relax to it. And as she started to relax to it, she was able to get more and more clear messages from the other side.
Yeah.
And she was able to learn how to transmit, like you said, she'd get these thought blocks. She was learning how to take those thought blocks and turn them into English sentences. Because the words weren't coming across as words. It was these thought blocks, these concepts. And she had to turn them into sentences. So she's a translator in a sense.
Yep, and she just had to get used to tuning into all that.
That's right. In the process, they're, of course, teaching her how to use the law of attraction, because the more that she's able to raise her vibration level, the better she's able to get clear thought blocks from them. So it becomes a self-feeding process. It's a vortex. It's a high vibration vortex. To make a long story short, eventually, of course, Jerry is thrilled by all this because he's the one who ends up talking to Abraham through Esther. Esther is just channeling him, and Jerry's carrying on the conversation. He's just like loaded with questions, and he's asking everything he could possibly ask, and then they're recording a lot of this stuff, and they're basically making a record of the information. And Jerry gets so excited, he wants to bring in friends who would want to talk to Abraham through Esther. And so they start doing that, and eventually it becomes an actual business. They start, hiring Esther out, so to speak. So, again, one more opportunity for Esther to say, "What have I gotten myself into?"
Yes, and then it turned into books. And the books are actually written by Abraham through Esther.
Which is, again, weird. It's hard to buy into it. It's hard to say, yeah, that's really what happened. This isn't Esther just typing out her own stuff and pretending that it's Abraham. That's a hard one. And if it's a permanently hard one, you don't have to buy into it. It's okay. I've actually bought into it. I mean, when Joel was my co-host, he told me he never really bought into it. So we actually had a point of disagreement, which was rare for us. But he had a lot of trouble with that idea. But he loved the teachings of Abraham-Hicks because the teachings are wonderful. So whether you buy into the story or not, I guess doesn't really matter. What does matter is the wealth of information that has come through Esther Hicks. is phenomenal. The perspective of how to handle, first of all, how to understand what the law of attraction is, because really, as far as I can tell, she's the first person who had that concept presented to her as the law of attraction. I haven't been able to find anyone else who did it before she did. Have you?
No, not in that way. No.
I'm pretty sure she was the first one. I don't know if she actually formulated the phrase. I think there may have been somebody else who formulated the phrase for the first time, but she's the first one who got clear information about what it is, how to use it, why it seems to work sometimes and doesn't seem to work at other times, and all this stuff. She got some really clear guidance on it, and that's what Asking It Is Given is all about. It's the book that records exactly that.
Yes, and for anyone who doesn't know, then her career kind of came where they started going all over the U.S., and she would do these like weekend-long or day-long kind of
there were seminars,
reading
basically,
questions. Yeah, she had where she's on a stage, and then there's a chair on the stage, and people would always come to hear her. And then whoever wanted to ask Abraham a question goes on the stage, sits in the chair, and asks the question, and then Esther answers the question, but it's really Abraham answering. She's just kind of used as the vessel for the information. And she has Abraham cruises now, where you go on the cruise, and all day are different Abraham question and answer periods, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the Abraham seminars, I guess you might call them, have become incredibly popular. She's still doing them today. Sadly, Jerry Hicks died about 2 or 3 years ago. He was in his late 80s. He was up there, and I guess he had some sort of a cancer. But I also got the sense that he felt like he was done with his life, which is basically what Abraham teaches us anyway. That part of their teaching is that we die when we choose to die. It's not that it just happens to us. We may not deliberately think the thought, I want to die, but we set ourselves up for it in various ways.
Yeah.
And we do that when we've lived out the life we want to live, when we're done with it. So, people find a way to die, in a sense.
Yeah, and I have to say that I went to one of her day-long programs.
Did you?
And after experiencing that, she's definitely like the real thing. Like when she's up, she comes out as Esther, and then she goes, okay, let's start, and she kind of closes her eyes, and she tunes in, however she tunes in to the Abraham information.
I saw a video of her doing this one time, and she says, bye-bye.
Yeah, and then when she opens her eyes, she's Abraham, kind of.
Right.
And then she even talks at first a little bit differently, like a little slower. It's very interesting. And then
it's a very stilted way of talking. That's one of the most fascinating things to me, because it doesn't flow like you and I are talking in just conversational
English. Yeah, it's a little
English.
different. Yeah, it's a little different. And the amazing part, like when I say she's the real thing, because people came up there, and no matter what they asked her, no matter how they tried to like throw her for a loop by asking certain questions in a certain way, she always handled it in like the most amazing, down-to-earth way, with all from a total law of attraction point of view. And you were just like, wow, this information is amazing.
Yeah. The thing, too, about her role is she has gotten to the point now where she's actually much more comfortable being the conduit for Abraham than she is actually talking on stage herself.
It seems like it, right?
She actually says it. In fact, I think she says it here. Yeah. Okay. This comes from the end of the introduction. She says, in the early days of our work with Abraham, our audiences wanted us to explain our relationship with Abraham. How did your meeting occur? How do you maintain your relationship? Why did they choose you? What is it like to be the speaker of such profound wisdom? So Jerry and I would spend a few minutes at the beginning of every speaking engagement or radio or television interview trying our best to satisfy those questions. But, here's the underlined part, but I always felt impatient with that part of our presentation. I just wanted to relax and allow Abraham's consciousness to begin flowing and to get on with what Jerry and I felt was the true reason we were standing there to begin with. And that theme comes out a lot from her when you hear her interviewed. She was on Oprah Radio, for instance.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that interview?
A piece of it. I did.
Okay.
I heard a piece of it.
Well, when she began that interview, Oprah was trying to do the same kind of thing that she just described there. Oprah was trying to kind of ply her with questions about how this whole thing started and so forth. And Esther was just saying, let me just get into Abraham's, because Abraham can explain this so much better than I can.
Yeah.
She just feels much more comfortable when she's allowing this consciousness to flow through her and be its voice. So,
right, and most of the time when she is on stage, 90% of it is Abraham as coming through. It's not her. So I could understand why she would feel more comfortable.
Yeah, the only thing that's coming from her is that she's the one formulating the English words from the thoughts that are beginning to her. That's it.
Yeah.
The rest is them. And you can tell from the way... This is one of the things I kind of divined from listening to the stilted language that I call it. I realized that Esther, as she is translating, so to speak, is trying really, really hard to be very precise to the concepts that she's getting. So she's constantly reaching for the right word to describe this message she's getting, this thought that she's getting. And if you listen to early recordings from the very earliest parts when she was doing it, it was much more stilted. Over time, it's become much more relaxed.
That would make sense, I could get,
Yeah, because she's just gotten better at picking up that vibrational level. So you can just imagine what she went through trying to make that connection and then make the connection work, so to speak, and make it flow.
Especially when it was something you weren't even trying to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, apparently she's done enough now that it's become a part of her life, and in fact, she'll tell stories. Actually, it's Abraham will tell stories about Esther's experience through Esther's voice, which is a little weird. But for instance, I remember one where they had, I'm not sure if Esther still lives there now that Jerry's passed, but when Jerry was still alive, they had a home in, I think, San Antonio, Texas, somewhere in Texas. And there was one particular day where she went out to just look at the day, and I guess they lived out in a very rural section. And as she's looking out, she says, "Abraham, is that you?" And Abraham says, "You caught us looking through your eyes."
Interesting.
So she has this ongoing private discussion that goes with them too. And from what I remember hearing in the interview she had with Oprah, they don't interfere with her life all the time. They pull away. So they're there as long as she can handle it, and then they pull away so she can have downtime.
Yeah, I never thought about that one, but that would make sense.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have to. So, for instance, this one particular morning, Abraham said to her, "Esther, we are aware of your questions that are radiating from the mass consciousness of your planet. And here through you, we will joyously offer the answers." I mean, that's a weird way of talking. I'm sorry. That's just plain weird. "Relax and enjoy the delicious unfolding of this book." So that's how she ended up writing "Ask and It Is Given," because Abraham basically was, laying out their ideas for the mass consciousness of the planet.
Yes. Well, even when she talks at her seminars, when she's as Abraham, she does use words like, "Oh, and you humans are such and such.
Yes.
And your planet is such and such." So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And if you're having trouble with the idea and you don't really believe that she's actually channeling anybody, you have to kind of be willing to get around that part and just kind of let it go.
Yes, and it's worth doing that because the information is so good.
The information is fabulous.
Yeah.
We've got about 15, 16 minutes left in the show. Why don't we start on Chapter 1? It's a 22-chapter book. We got plenty to talk about. We're going to be talking about this for like the next 4 months. So why don't we just start on Chapter 1? We won't get real far into it, but it's such a good title. I mean, you noticed that before we even started doing this week's episode.
Yes.
The Power of Feeling Good Now.
Mm-hmm. So important.
Which is a terrific chapter name because it lays out right at the beginning, this is what we're going to be talking about because it's so important. And when you first read it, you say, "The Power of Feeling Good Now." Okay, so what's the point? But it really is.
A lot. Yeah, in the beginning, like when I first read that, I was like, "Oh, okay." But now I'm like, "Yes."
Yeah, it takes on different meaning over time as you continue to study and study and study all the reams of information that's come out of Esther Hicks that she attributes to Abraham. Let's read this first couple paragraphs. It's a good way to start. It starts off by saying, "We are called Abraham. and we are speaking to you from the non-physical dimension. Of course, you must understand that you also have come forth from the non-physical dimension. So we are not so different from one another. Your physical world has come forth from the projection of the non-physical. Boy, these sentences are just loaded with meaning. Your physical world has come forth from the projection of the non-physical.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that's in there, and your first time you're reading it, you're saying, what? But over time, you begin to realize just how insightful that is. That's really important to know. It's basically giving us a way of answering what we've often called unanswerable questions, unknowable questions. You know, the questions that lead to religion and so forth. You know, where do we come from? What's the nature of spirit? What's the nature of God? How were we created? All that kind of thing. It goes to answer those questions, and it's kind of dumbfounding the first time that you run into it, because you say, wait a minute, what are they actually saying here?
Well, read the next sentence.
Okay.
The next sentence kind of explains it a little more.
Well, it says, your physical world has come forth from the projection of the non-physical. In fact, you and your physical world are extensions of the non-physical source energy.
Yes.
So there's another concept, extensions.
And source energy.
And source energy, yeah. Okay, so now we're getting this word source. What the heck does that mean? Source.
I think it means source energy can mean God, however you interpret God. That's how I feel. That's what that means.
Yeah, I think source means we want to know where we all come from. Well, we come from the source. So let's call the energy field that we all come from the source energy.
Yeah.
And that instantly becomes an answer to the question before you even ask the question.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they ended up trying to get her to call it source energy. Moving on, it says, in this non-physical realm, we do not use words, for we do not require language. Well, also, they lack mouths and tongues. So it would make it a little bit difficult to try to communicate in words. In fact, he says it here, we also do not have tongues with which to speak or ears with which to hear. Although we do communicate perfectly with one another. Our non-physical language is one of vibration. Now, there's another word that comes in, vibration. We hear that one a lot over time. And our non-physical communities or families are those of intention. Whoa. I mean, they're just loading these words in here that are just, the first time you read it, you say, what the frig are they talking
it takes
about?
a minute to
In other words, they write, we radiate that which we are vibrationally, and others of like intent assemble. There's some of that stilted language I was talking about. Others of like intent assemble.
Yes.
What the hell? And then they say that is also true of your physical world, although most of you have forgotten that this is so. So now
what does that mean to you?
Now that they've messed with my mind, then they do a complete reverse on me. That paragraph, I'm glad that they put it out there first, because it kind of gives you a warning, like, okay, you're going to deal with some really deep concepts here, and it's going to take you a while. So just deal with it. But you have to kind of accept it that way, that you're not going to get it all in the first reading. You're not going to get it on the second reading. It's going to take a while to get a sense of what they're talking about here. And that's the challenge, isn't it? The first challenge is, can you handle this information as it's being given to you? Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's good at first if you can't get the whole thing at once.
Why do you say that?
Because if you kind of just say, okay, I'll just allow that, okay, and you keep moving on, then you don't get so hung up on that. Because kind of after you read the book and you have all this other information, then when you go back to that, it kind of makes more sense. At least that's how I experienced it.
Nah, that didn't work for me at all. But I'm glad it works for you, because that's the key thing. Yeah. Everybody's going to find a different way to make it work. But if I tried to do it that way, I would just get confused.
Right, because otherwise I would have been stuck on that, paragraph.
When I first read that paragraph, I had to just leave it. I really couldn't take it in. I couldn't make sense out of it, because there were so many concepts in there that I had never heard expressed in the way that they use these concepts. So the first reading was like, what are they talking about? What does that mean? Speak English! And, of course, they are speaking English. You just have to kind of get used to it. It's a different dialect, if you will.
Yes.
So it turns out, again, reading from the paragraph, Abraham is a family of non-physical beings naturally assembled by our powerful intention to remind you, our physical extensions, of the laws of the universe that govern all things.
But I think you need to read that
again. It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
Yeah. I will read it. Can you read it one more time?
I will. Abraham is a family of non-physical beings naturally assembled by our powerful intention to remind you, our physical extensions, of the laws of the universe that govern all things.
Now I get it. I just had to hear it again.
And you've read this stuff a lot, and you had to hear it twice.
Yeah.
That thing is just... I mean, how do you break that one down? Abraham is a family. Okay, we can kind of buy into that. Of non-physical beings. Okay, I'm kind of with you. Right. Naturally assembled. What the hell is naturally assembled? You mean you can assemble unnaturally? What does that mean, anyway?
Well, naturally assembled by our powerful intentions.
But what does the naturally have to do with it?
Well, because the intention brought them together.
And I think what that really means is you have to look at the root of the word naturally, which is nature. And by nature, I don't mean nature as in the world of plants and animals and trees.
Right.
I mean nature in the sense that we describe a person's nature. We describe the essence of the person as being this is their nature. So if you use nature that way, then naturally assembled means by their nature they assembled because of this powerful intention they want to remind us of, which is really a screwy way of talking, but I think that's what they're trying to drive at. And then the other part that throws you is our physical extensions. So reading in context, naturally assembled by our powerful intention to remind you, our physical extensions. So it's you.
But we're the physical extension, meaning
them.
us.
We're the physical
humans,
extensions.
Us humans, yes.
And to make the matter even more confusing, later on you discover not only are we physical extensions of them, we're actually physical extensions of ourselves. And now if you're not totally lost, you're actually gaining insight.
Yeah. No, it's a lot to take in, especially the first time hearing all of it.
I remember, this is where I got my analogy of the signs at the beach in New Jersey or whatever. You know the ones I'm talking about? Not the signs, but they're like boards that show a scene, and you can put your head in the various, there are like 2 or 3 places for people to put their heads, and you can take a picture.
Yeah, you can take a picture.
So here's the muscle man with the Bathing Beauty and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the putting your head into the hole is equivalent to seeing the physical side of who we are. And if you want to see the non-physical side of who we are, you go around to the side of the board and you see the rest of the body sticking out. That's the metaphor that I thought of. And when I thought of that metaphor, now I could start to make sense out of the idea of us as physical beings being physical extensions of the rest of us who are the spiritual side, so to speak, the non-physical side. And in that way, now I can start to make sense out of this concept that we are all part of Source Energy. We came from Source Energy because we are still part of Source Energy. Just because we're living here in the physical world doesn't mean that we stopped being Source Energy. We're part of that. And it kind of answers the people who say, well, okay, how God, for instance, we are created by God. We are made in the likeness of God, as Christians like to say. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you look at it from the way Abraham is expressing it, what it really means is we're all part of the same energy field.
Yes, so we're all extensions of that.
We're all extensions of that. So as long as that's the case, in that sense, we are all part of creation and we are all creators at the same time. Because all the creation came from the source energy, and that makes the source energy the creator, and we are part of that creator field, so to speak.
Yes. Yes, and there's a wonderful author and lecturer, Iyanla Van Zandt. Have you heard of her?
No.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She even has her own show on the OWN network called Fix My Life by Iyanla Van Zandt. And she was talking to someone who was in a lot of fear, and she said, well, the main reason why people are in fear is because they forget that we're all connected to source energy. We forget that we're connected to that. And once you remember that, you can take comfort in knowing that.
Yes.
That's kind of an interesting way of looking at it as well.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's part of the journey of trying to understand what Abraham-Hicks and others are trying to tell us, is trying to put together pictures that we humans in the physical world can grasp onto and make sense out of.
Yeah.
And if you read the stuff and listen to the stuff, and you can listen to Abraham-Hicks all you want to. There's like reams of it. There's hours and hours of it recorded on YouTube. You can play like seminars all over the place, and they've got people have broken up into pieces. Oh, you want to learn about this? Here, listen to this video, and it's just endless amounts. And fortunately, Abraham-Hicks and Esther Hicks have not tried to do anything with their copyright, so it enables the message to just flow and gets passed along to everybody because of the power of the internet, which is terrific. I think it's really great that they're doing that. We've got about 5 minutes left. We should probably try to draw a little bit of a conclusion on what we've been talking about here, although we've just barely started to touch the chapter.
We've barely started,
I would say, why don't we continue this chapter next week? So next week will be the official beginning of Chapter 1, since we've only just started to really dip our little toe in it. That's about all we've got.
Right, but it's a good starting point for us and who's ever listening to kind of think about until we continue next week.
Yeah. And it's also, this is like a little plug for Esther Hicks, it's an opportunity for you to go get the book, which you can buy at Amazon. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble online. Any of the online stores you can buy it at. You can buy them at any of the offline bookstores, too. Almost all of them have this book. But you can also find it free. We discovered a PDF copy online. So
don't tell anybody. You're not supposed to. Esther will be mad at us.
No, I don't think so. I think Abraham-Hicks loves that. I think Abraham loves the fact that this information is being transmitted and that it's been shared all over the place. So, I understand what you're saying, but I really think that they're happy about it. So, I'd say go get it. But literally, just do a Google search for "Ask and It Is Given," and you'll find it. It's like something like a 5 megabyte file. So it takes a minute to come down, but it's pretty easy. And once you open it, man, you're opening yourself to a world that we're going to be spending a lot of time on for the next 22 weeks. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's a good world.
It is a good world. I'll tell you, I used to be. I had told this story to Joel numerous times, but I had some pretty unhappy experiences with religion, particularly when I was in my teens, and I actually rejected spirituality for the longest time. Mm-hmm. This actually gave me a positive approach to spirituality that I could accept and take in. So I'm grateful for the fact that they were willing to try to come through and that Esther was willing to be the vehicle for them to come through. Regardless of whether you believe in it, I'm glad that it happened because it gave me the opportunity to reconnect mentally to what I've always been connected to anyway. Because it's not like we ever lose our connection. The connection's always there.
But you resonated with it when you heard about it.
And when I resonated with it, I did what they talk about later on. I got into that vortex. I got into that higher vibration level, which in and of itself was a tough concept. But we'll save that concept for next week, don't you think?
Yeah.
Anyway, before we leave everybody, we didn't get to do this last week, so let's do it this week. We want to remind everybody, not only can you find us here on PRN, you can also find us at our website, which is a great place to go because you can sign up for us as a podcast and catch us regardless of whether you happen to be tuned into PRN any given week. That way you won't miss anything, and it actually comes right to your iPhone or your Android phone. So you just get an instant reminder, oh yeah, there's the show, LOA Today. So you can go there and subscribe to us. You can also find us in the iTunes store. So there's another place, if you're an iPhone user, it's another place you can find us. It's a really great way. And David, you've been gaining clients through your service as a life coach. Tell people how they can find you.
Yes, you can find me at lifecoachdavid.com. It's very easy. And I also just uploaded a very good free ebook on lifecoachdavid.com called My Favorite Law of Attraction Articles.
Excellent.
So that might be something that would interest people listening because there's some really good articles there. And then you can also find out more about me and if you're interested in possibly Law of Attraction life coaching.
Well, we're over time. David, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Same here. Fully enjoyed it.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.